So I said that. I'm going to read chapter 13, but this is not the focus of my study tonight. I'm going to read 13, but before we get done, we will visit Philippians Chapter 4. And anybody that's familiar with Scripture knows in Philippians Chapter 4, Paul gives us some wonderful advice. And he tells us, number one, not to be worried about anything. And it doesn't matter how you want to look that up in the Greek text. It means to be worried about not one single thing. I mean, that is the purest interpretation of what Paul is saying. And then he gives you the key of how not to do that. And he ends it in that chapter with all these things that you are to think on. Think on these things. So even in the midst of an evil world, with everything going on every hand, guys, I mean, it's if we get through this winter without running out of food in these stores, it's going to be nothing short of a miracle from God. Now, the dollar store got their truck in up here just before church started tonight. But if you went up there yesterday, there's no water. There's a lot of things that just was not available to get at the dollar store. We're not accustomed to that. So these days are going to get worse more than likely before they get better. But as every one of us at this point, we should not be concerned about that because we have provisions in place. But I'm making mention of that simply because when I begin to read about this mark of the beast, there's nothing in that you can pull joy out of. It's going to be a terrible time, and we're seeing the groundwork. Now pay attention to what I say. I'm not calling the vaccine the mark of the beast. It's not the mark. And let me make that very clear. And I know there's some people out there preaching this is the mark. They're calling it the beast. I'm sorry, it's not. It's not. It's not meeting the criteria, but it surely is gearing us for this. You know, many times we kind of had the ideal that all of these things would happen. We would wake up one morning and now we're the mark of the beast system being introduced to us. No, little by little we're being introduced to us, and if we don't keep our eye on the Lord, then we won't even realize it's happening. So we've got to keep our eyes on God. We've got to make sure that we are listening. So in Revelation chapter 13, let me go ahead and just read this. And I stood, and this I is John, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was likened to a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, this is referring to Satan, gave him, the Antichrist, his power and his seat and his authority. Now I want to always remember, Satan is a great imitator. We see in the Bible a Holy Trinity all throughout the Bible. Even the book of the book of Genesis, the Scripture says, "Let us." And I don't care how you want to pull the Hebrew out of that. It is plurality. It is us, not 3 gods. but a Godhead that's made of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. You remove any one of those components, it's no longer God. That's why whenever people say, well, the Muslims worship the same God as we do. Well, because they have a history with us until we get to Ishmael. With Hagar having had relationships with Abraham, and then giving birth to Ishmael, which now became the Nation of Islam, the Muslim folks as we know. We have that portion of history with them. So when 9/11 came, everyone was saying we worship the same God, and they wanted to use that. Well, I'm sorry. If anybody does not believe that Jesus Christ is also God, then we are not worshiping the same God. You cannot take any one of those components. And I understand that even the other religions, that's where they have the problem with Christianity. They say we worship three gods. And the reason they say that is because we may know what we mean to each other, but we're terrible with our terminology. We'll say, God said to the Son. Well, if you're saying God said to the Son, then automatically you'd say, okay, God is now talking to the Son. The proper terminology is the Father is speaking to the Son. And if we learn to do that now when you see God, when you say the word God, you're talking about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You're not talking about just the Father alone. It has to be all three before it's God. So we see here that Satan be the imitator. So now where we have the Holy Trinity, now we're getting a glimpse at an unholy Trinity. And it's very important because he is an imitator, and the reason he is, that's why he fools the Christians so much. Because he'll have things, even in these last days, and we'll read about it, he's going to be performing great miracles, and surely people are going to think these miracles are from God. Where did I get to? Verse 3. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? And who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Now, let me stop there a moment. The church, anyway, the American church, for years we've been running rogue. And we haven't a clue, and I'm not talking about every person, but I'm talking a huge percentage of the church, and that means Christians. We haven't a clue how to even hear from God. So we have to venture out on our own ideologies and our own thinkings. When this pandemic came in 2000, well, we see it happening in 2019 in China, in 2020 we have it landed right in our lap in America. Then all of a sudden we see all this stimulus money come, but what most people didn't know, not only stimulus money for individuals, but they were giving stimulus money to businesses. And the businesses, part of this deal, they wouldn't lay anyone off. Well, you know, they're saying it's going to be a free loan. Folks, there is nothing free. And I'm going somewhere with this because at the same time these businesses were getting this quote-unquote free money, I'm getting bombarded from the Christian community to also take this money that's being offered to churches from the federal government. Well, I really feel like maybe I fail most of the time, but there's times I really do feel like I have an ear to be able to hear and understand what the Lord would be wanting me and in particular this church to do. So I went through a period of 2 months of constantly refusing money. Now understand, we're not taking offerings up. Utilities are the same. All of our bills are the same. But we're in a state of lockdown. People's not getting to work. So money is really tight. Well, we refused the money. Now here we are in 2021, and I'm getting reports from Chicago, from down around Atlanta, and other places now that churches are not allowing you to come and worship with them if you cannot prove that you've been vaccinated. Now, if I could, if I was privy to all of their information, their workings, I would probably guess these churches that are doing this with this government money. And they're being threatened, you either do this, and they're wanting the pastors, I just watched an interview, they're wanting pastors to stand up and really belittle the people that will not be vaccinated. Again, I've told you all along, this is not about being vaccinated. If you want to vaccinate, vaccinate. If you don't. There should be okay on both sides of this. But no doubt they've told them if they don't do this, then they're going to pay this money back. Now I'm speculating there. I don't have that information. But what in the world, why in the world would a church tell people they can't come? Because if they can't come, that means they don't bring their money. So a lot of these churches, they are really after the money, so they're telling you not to come. So when they're telling you not to come, they're telling you we don't want your money either. So there has to be something greater that's pushing this agenda. And I've got a feeling it's because they took that stimulus money and they don't have the money to pay it back. Because now they were offering some very generous dollars, basically for free. Let's go ahead back to 4. And they worshiped the dragon which gave power to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? And there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him 42 months. That's half of the tribulation period. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nation. Now I do want you to know, this overcome them doesn't mean that he's overcoming them to the point where they're not relying on God anymore, but they're having to. They've switched sides and basically went over here to the side of Satan. That's not the overcoming they're talking about. No, the overcoming is they are going to be they're going to be severely persecuted. Verse 8. And all who dwell upon the earth shall worship, whose names are not written in the book of life. We're going to worship of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And if any man have an ear, let him hear. Verse 10. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. And he who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb. Here we go again, this imitation. And he spoke as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, the earth, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Verse 13. And he, meaning the false prophet, did great wonders, so that he made fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives them who dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And saying to them who dwell upon the earth that they should make an image to the beast. We remember this being done somehow or another. We just can't handle worshiping something that we can't see. We kind of like to make images. When I went to India, and that's a very that's a very friendly God country. 330 million gods. A tree growing across the road, a big tree limb. Well, they decided not to cut that down because it just looked really strange. So they made it a god. And it's nothing but a traffic hazard. And me being me, I said, well, you know, if I was at home, I'd take my chainsaw and I'd cut that limb off out of the way. And they said, oh no, you can't do that. That's a god. Well, at the same time, me and another guy was over here. We're kind of stupid about this stuff. We don't know anything. And we walked down this little bitty stone elephant. And it was a miniature elephant, not real, stone, made out of stone. And I told him, I said, get on that elephant. He jumped up on that elephant. Here they come running. So, didn't realize we were on their God. You know, so, because before I got there, I thought they only had one thing they worshipped, and that was sacred to them, that was the cow. Everything. If they call to one God and he doesn't answer, they just keep calling. And I will tell you, I stayed next to a Hindu temple, and that week they had an entire week of worship for 24/7. They were playing this loud music, offering this time of praise and worship to the Hindu gods. You could just feel the evil in this. Verse 15. And he, again, I'll read this again, had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast that should be killed. Now, whether or not this is going to be some type of an illusion, but whatever the case may be, it's going to appear that he is making this image come to life and move. If we go back into the book of Daniel, we remember that Daniel was told that when you hear a certain sound, everyone is to stop and to offer this worship. Well, it's going to be not necessarily that way, but the end result's going to be the same. If you do not worship this beast, there's going to be some deadly consequences. Verse 16, and he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Now, I want to say something. First of all, if you're not familiar with Bible prophecy, one thing, do not get so close-minded that you're not open to things happening different than the way you perceived it in your mind. Because everyone teaches this, and I just heard a pastor the other day, and it may be this way, I'm just saying don't close your mind to this, that there's going to be, that there will be a chip in the hand or there will be a chip in the head, and that in order for you to buy or sell, you're going to have to scan your hand or you're not going to be able to buy and sell. Now, I'm not going to say that there will not be a visible sign. I'm not going to say there won't be a chip, but I'm here to tell you, if that's the only way that he will mandate whether you buy and sell is you have to scan your hand, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Because we see that today. Man, we've got, I mean, how many, and we're all privy to this information, people that get food stamps. Some people. I mean, if you've never been approached, then, okay, but I have been several times. Okay, Roger, you give me $20, and I'll give you $40 worth of food stamps. Well, this is happening all the time. So do you not think that someone up there is going to do some of that bargaining if all they have to have is you to scan the hand? To scan their own hand, give you $20 worth of food for $100 worth of money. No, this is going to be a much more sophisticated system than what we just see on the surface here. Because this person, this Antichrist, this system, this government system is going to be able to monitor, and folks, that's not far-fetched. How many of you realize that they are following you everywhere you go? If you got a cell phone, you cannot shut all the GPS, you cannot shut everything off. You can go in there and shut a lot of that off, but you cannot shut off where they can ping you for 911. You can't do it. It's impossible. Even if you root your phone, you can't shut that off. So this ability to be able to invade our privacy, we're inundated with it. So, and again, I'm not going to argue that okay, this is exactly what's going to happen. The only thing I'm really saying is, do not get so fixated that it's going to be a 666 and a 666, and then you're going to have to swap your hand, because if you're not careful, you may miss exactly what's going to happen. Because I will tell you this much. Just like the number 666, the prime number in that is 8, and I'm not going to go into the numbers because I really like to. but I'm not going to. Every time I do, I'm reminded how boring it is, so I'm going to leave that alone. But this, I will tell you what it is symbolic of. In your right hand, your work. In your head, your allegiance, your dedication, your worship. I mean, there's more involved than just putting a number so people can see it, or a chip. It's more involved than just taking it. You are giving your allegiance to this system. And I'm here to tell you, if you give your allegiance to anybody other than Christ, you're in trouble whether you take a mark or not. And my goodness, but the Christian world has always been said, you know, I've heard it time and time again. Pastor, I told my family, whatever you do if you get left behind, don't you take the mark, don't you take the mark. Do not take the mark. Listen, they may go to the woods and hide out and never take the mark, but if they do not come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, they'll spend eternity in hell, even though they didn't take the mark. Not taking the mark is not going to get you in heaven. Jesus said there's only one way to heaven, and that's through Him. No other name can a man enter heaven. He said if you try to enter into any other way, you're nothing but a thief or a robber. So we need to be very aware of that. And verse 16, He calls both small and great, rich and poor, and free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So 666. And the most important part of that is not the 666, but it is the number of man, not a complete perfection of 7 that God is. That's why you see 7 related to God, because that means completeness, perfection. He covers all areas. So when we see this happening, and this is why, I'll be honest with you, because I just honestly believe we'll have to go to some type of centralized digital currency so that the technology will be able to be in play on this. Nowhere do I think that's a good idea. And also, you know, we get a little nervous sometimes, but especially when I say things like the dollar is gone. Folks, listen, the fiat dollar will go away at some point. I don't know exactly how the Fed dollar, the digital dollar, but if we stay with the digital dollar, everything will stay the same. You will still be buying and selling with the money, the monetary system that we have, whether it's digital or fiat. It's still, I personally believe the dollar completely is gone. I'm going to spend just a few moments here. China, they have the ability to back their currency, and it's probably the yuan. They have the ability to back it with gold. They just do. And not only that, they can cripple the Bitcoin. Because they own so much Bitcoin, they can devalue the Bitcoin. It wouldn't take much. They could flood the market now, but I will tell you, if they did that, then people would just buy it up, and then the Bitcoin would come back. But see, I've never believed in the Bitcoin being the last day's money, simply because it's a decentralized money, and the government doesn't have a way to control it. That's why China's banned it. They've moved They moved all the miners out. America now is mining 35% of the cryptocurrency. China is moving them completely out, and because they've got enough Bitcoin, they can still control it, and they've got enough gold to back their money. And then there's some countries that are getting deeply invested in a lot of this cryptocurrency. And then, as I said in prayer, this lady that Biden has trying to get appointed to be the comptroller of the bank system. It's her thinking, and her goal is to get away from the banking system, the private banks, and go straight into a federal controlled banking system that will be run through the digital currency. And you can read that paper. I think it's called the People's, oh my goodness, I'm going to get that for you. I've got it here. I did have it saved. It's called the if you want it, I can find it later and give it. But it's her article, and actually, if you research it too much, they're saying that the Biden administration is really pushing to implement that very thing that she's wanting to do. When you think about all this, and I actually took a chapter of the Bible that to due diligence, that would be about 4 or 5 parts. And I spent 30 minutes on it. So I didn't even scratch the surface. But I touched enough in that to make every one of us, it could cause us to be fearful that we could lose everything that we have in a moment's time. That even the things that we have, these all could go away simply because of our faith. And you know, we can speak about it and not think much about it if we think this is still 50 or 60 years down the road. I honestly don't believe that it is. I believe it's very near, but it's really serious whenever you think, if I stand for Christ, then there's a good chance my family's going to go hungry, or we're going to be persecuted. It's the Christian, the way the Christian is being treated in America, it's getting worse and worse. But now we're going to see more persecution. Jesus warned us that the world hates me; they're going to hate you. We're going to see a nation and a world turn against Christianity because Christianity does not align with their agenda in no way, shape, or form. Whether you read the UN 30 agenda or the Great Reset or or anyone's agenda, even this cultural, Christianity doesn't line up with it in any way, shape, or form. So we have to be able now to really think about what Christ said. You have to live in the world, but you can't be part of it. Well, I'll be honest with you. In America, we've been allowed to be part of it. I mean, we've had Christian beliefs, and I know we've drifted off of where we used to be, but for the most part, you could be a citizen in America and really enjoy being an American, because we do. We say it's the greatest nation we ever lived in. Even with all this going on, we still want to say it's the greatest nation that there is. Our nation has been so wonderful to its citizens. In my opinion, we could still be a part of a system and that was not in jeopardy with God. Now, I'm not saying that governments are God, and I hope you understand what I'm saying. It wasn't like you were in India or that you were in Haiti or some of these other countries, in some of these Middle Eastern countries, where Christians are being persecuted and their laws are completely opposite of our Christian belief system. See, our laws in this nation, and still many our constitutions and probably still all of our state constitutions, are deeply inundated with the things of God. So it's made it so that we could enjoy living in America without feeling guilty that we're doing something wrong when it comes to our walk with God. Listen, and now you may say, well, Pastor, I don't agree with you. Well, yeah, you do too. Because every one of us, I would say, I mean, I don't know that you have, but I've got a good feeling. I'm 99.9% sure on this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we thought that that was some type of great sin, then why would we ever put our hand on our heart and say something like that? It's because America was birthed with this. I'm not saying we were perfect and that there wasn't things going on, but the ideology of America was God-centered. Well, it's no longer there. So now we are in a very confusing, for lack of a better word, place, because if we continue this route, we're not going to be able to put our hand on our heart anymore and pledge our allegiance to this government. That's why we, the people, are supposed to get the government back in line. But in the middle of all this turmoil, Philippians Chapter 4, begin at verse 4. Paul says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice." Paul here is teaching on and this is why I'm constantly saying we have to be ready spiritually, mentally, emotionally, because Paul here is teaching on being emotionally well, for lack of a better word. And how he said do this, it's because he follows it up that we are emotionally stable, we're emotionally okay because we begin it with rejoicing in the Lord. I'm going to tell you, too many things coming after us. We've got to get this right, or we are mentally not going to be able to handle what's coming. And this business about the Lord coming before it gets too bad is already out the door. Folks, there are people losing their job. There's people that's being made to do things that they do not want to do. So these things, we're going to be out here before it gets very bad. It's already bad. Nothing like it's going to be, but it's bad for what we were accustomed to. Verse 5. "Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand." Now, very clear there, because this is probably really talking definitely could be talking about the rapture, definitely the second coming. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing. In other words, some would translate, do not worry about anything, not one thing. Why can you do that? Because we do not bury our head in sand, because he answers it next. But in everything you go by prayer and supplication. So the cure for worry is prayer.
Amen.
The cure for worry is not getting our state representatives to fix the voting machines, nor is it to get our government to stop the mandates. That is not where we're going to answer all of this mental anguish that we're going through. It starts and ends with prayer and supplication. But he says you do it with this way, in the middle of all this. And if you could go back and look at all that was going on when Paul would have been writing this, he said, first of all, do this with thanksgiving. I'm reading the Bible here. Let your request be made known unto God. And then he said, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and your minds through Christ Jesus. I'm going to tell you, at the end of the day, the most important thing that God could give any of us, because at some point, all of these prophecies are going to have to be fulfilled because they've already been spoken. The Bible speaks of them. So all of these prophecies that we read in the book of Revelation are going to have to be fulfilled. And there's only one thing that's going to be able to help us to weather any type of storm, especially at that type of intensity, and that's having the peace of God. Verse number 8, he said, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true." Boy, if I had a couple of hours, I would stop on some of this, because I'm going to tell you, we are putting our faith, our trust, and our thinking on things that are not true. If we're not careful, we're even believing in doctrines that are not true, and then we're wondering, where is the peace of God? The peace of God is there. It's not going to work if we are in the middle of doctrines that are evil or even just wrong, misinterpretation, well-intended. You're not going to find the peace of God in nothing but whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these. I'm going to end it with this. I do not recommend you do this, but I like to try experiments. It wasn't long after they built this highway out here, 4-lane, once you get on it before you get to the airport. And Gary Long still comes here, but at the time Joyce was still alive, and they own a big farm on your right out through there. But back on the farm, they've got a huge radio tower that belongs to WCLC. So I tried an experiment. As much as I really tried to do the right thing, I fixated. Now this was in late at the night, no traffic. I fixated my attention on that tower. I kept my eyes on that tower. Next thing I know, I've run off the road. I don't care who you are, how well-intended you are. If you've got your mind on the wrong thing, that's exactly where you're headed. You better get your mind on Christ. And it better be the truth of Christ. If you do that, you'll stay on the straight and narrow. But remember, Jesus said there's two ways. There's a broad path and there's a narrow path. And that there's only one path for the Christian, and that is the narrow path. And then he gave a warning. He said, only a few will find it. Why? Because it's a narrow path. What do you have to do to get on the broad path? Nothing. You don't have to do anything to be on the broad path. If you stay on the narrow path, you have to keep your eyes on Christ. Anything else, you're going to go to the broad path. Let's bow our heads.